when you guys did the kind of private book release a couple years ago, you know, what really impressed me was a lot of the guys who played on the Southwestern team who did not go on to be the Anderson Hunts to go pro, the Jalen Rose, all the people that were in your dad's orbit. But the players who were at the end of the bench who spoke about that your father treated, whether you were Jalen Rose or or damn near the water boy, if you were a part of the Southwestern family, he looked out for Southwestern. He didn't just look out for Southwestern's blue chip players.
Absolutely, because his design, his goal was to help his and our and their community. So he was in the Southwestern community and assisted all. I mean, Johnny Johnson, a player at Southwestern in the day, says it best, you know, that Southwestern was a home for Ed, but it also was a great place for them because he was there. So they held whatever he said and whatever he did tight to the vest. In other words, where people outside of that community did not have that type of loyalty, and they also did not have the it's kind of getting ahead, but the scrutiny that a great coach like Perry Watson put on them to make the whole system work. I want to add one thing. Ed is extremely generous. So Perry had to make sure that he didn't go too far, too fast with the players because they had to earn what they got. So he had a balance there. So Southwestern was a great environment for them, but it was good for Ed too.
And on that Perry Watson note, and just for those who don't know, I know if you grew up in the Detroit area, and you're over 35 years old, you will remember the high school dynasty that Detroit Southwestern was. And their head coach was a gentleman by the name of Perry Watson. Perry Watson would go on later to be assistant coach at the University of Michigan, right?
Yes.
And then eventually head coach
at University of Detroit.
So when you hear Dick Vitale on ESPN talking about it, and it's a diaper dandy, that all plays into how, due to the events of those Southwestern players, and Dick Vitale leaves to go on, and this is the gentleman. There may have been one coach in between.
It was.
But Smokey Gaines, and Smokey in between, and Smokey came after that.
No, he came before. He came in between Dick and
Perry. And Perry, right? So there's this basketball dynasty that this coach, Perry Watson, has started to attribute to. And we were just talking before we got on camera, right?
Yes.
If we go back a little bit before you guys really get involved with I should take that back. So I was telling you an anecdote that the first time I remember seeing the Southwestern juggernaut was down at Callahan Hall, Detroit playoffs, and there was a senior guard by the name of Leslie Rockmore.
Yes.
Now at that point where Leslie Rockmore was leading Southwestern to the city championship, were you guys active? Were you guys active yet with the Southwestern family?
That was the actual, the beginning year when Antoine was a sophomore, Leslie was a senior. My father really got involved with it because Antoine is actually the son of a co-worker of my father's, and that's how they kind of hooked up. You know, he said, "Hey, is this your son?" He said, "Yeah, well, you got to come out and see him sometime." He said, "Bet, let's do that." So that's when it started. And once he came out, he saw something in Southwestern High that was different than a lot of other schools, which was a great amount of discipline, drive, and they had a greater sense of their community, being Southwest, which is kind of a area that's on its own in Detroit. It's not just a mix of the east side, west side. It's downriver. It's close to the river. It's a different area, and they have a sense of community there. I think that was greater than some of the other areas. So yes, that was the beginning.
Right. So that's Antoine the Judge Joubert. Correct. And again, I think if you're of a certain age, following the Rockmore, because Leslie Rockmore then goes on to U of L.
Yeah.
So Antoine's a sophomore then.
Yes.
His junior year, he is getting all the rave, right? 37
points per game, but no 3-point line. That's his average.
Wow.
As a junior.
He was a phenom. He was.
He was probably the greatest scorer that I've known of in high school basketball.
By his senior year, he wins the Mr. Michigan High School Player of the Year, right?
Yes.
And I'm not sure, but I know he was ranked in the top 5 high school players in the country.
Yes, for sure.
Right.
On anyone's ranking, he was top 5. He was number 1, number 2 on most of them.
Right. And he goes on.
Yeah.
So now this is 2 highly profile players leaving Southwestern.
Yes.
Your dad's starting to really get into the orbit of the Southwestern thing. And then the backdrop, some other players from that era, Roy Tarpley coming out of Cooley.
Yeah.
He goes on to Michigan. I think they win the championship.
Well, Roy didn't win the year that he wasn't on the championship team, but they won the Big Ten, and they won NIT. They won some other things, but they were very competitive. They had Gary Grant, who wasn't from this era, from Ohio, but they had almost a similar situation when they got Richard Relford and all those guys. But Antoine joined a great team, and they performed very well. Who
else out of that era? You had B.J. Armstrong, who was at Brother Rice, who went on to Iowa, of course, went on to the Chicago Bulls and won some rings with Jordan.
That's right.
Right?
Willie Burton, one of the few people to score 50 in the league, NBA, one.
Where did he come out?
He came out of DePort.
Willie Burton came out of DePort. So what I'm trying to say, family, at this time in the city, everybody knew somebody who was, and we were saying off camera, the effects of what was going on in Detroit high school basketball and the PSL was pretty much dictating who was going to win the Big Ten, who was probably going to play in the Final Four.
Yes.
So, it was a really impactful thing because this city was just producing. So if this is the backdrop, that these kids are big-time local kids, but everybody kind of knows, look, 2 years from now, they're going to be playing in the ACC, in the Big Ten, in the Pac-10, and where they go, so there becomes finance. There is a business element, right?
Yes, it is.
Of all that. So what begins to happen is, so we'll pick me up from there. So your dad, you got Leslie Rockmore. Yeah. He leaves. He goes to U of M. Your dad, I didn't know that, or actually I did read it in the book. I do remember that point, that your dad and Antoine's dad. Yeah. So kind of bring us up to speed a little bit on what happens after that.
Yeah. A little quick story about Rockmore. He was going to U of M, and my dad went to Southwestern, and he was playing baseball then. A lot of the guys that played basketball at Southwestern either started in or continued to play baseball. It was big down in Southwest Detroit. But long and short of it, Leslie said, yeah, I'm going to U of M. And my dad said, yeah, and you were thinking you were going to room with one person. But he said, but I have it that that'll be a change there. The bottom line is, Rockmore said, well, how does this guy know anything about what's happening with me at U of M? Who is this guy really? And he found out that he was correct about his roommate change, because Ed Martin wherever he goes, he makes connections with the powers that be, So he already had connections at U of M that would give him information that it wasn't clandestine. It was just something that would transpire in a conversation, especially concerning the kids that Ed supported. But long and short, Leslie goes. 2 years later, Antoine shows up, and now Ed's a constant fixture at games, etc. Because the 2 years that Antoine was in high school, we became closer and closer as families, as groups. We shared meals at each other's homes all the time. So we were a tight unit. So of course, when we went to U of M, that just continued. But what it did is it showed Ed that, these kids can make it to these major universities, but now they're in an environment where most of the people are wealthy. As a student at U of M, you're with other students who are capable of things greater than you. So Ed wanted to pad their landing there on campus. But one thing he said is, if they have a couple dollars pocket money, then they can participate on the group pizza outing, take the girl out for something that they see other students doing. So they can be a part of the campus environment and the atmosphere and not feel excluded.
And so two things on that point. So we're talking about a guy having to worry about athletes at schools like the University of Michigan, which are creating millions and billions of dollars.
Yes.
But there is a real scenario where you could be a star at the University of Michigan basketball team and not have money for Domino's Pizza.
Yes.
That was a real, that could really happen.
And then the booster, we talked with Jimmy King, one of the Fab Fivers, and he's sitting there saying, like, I didn't know a lot of this was going on. I wasn't getting any money, you know. And so therefore, there's a different pattern for different kids. When you go to U of M, they were fortunate to have Ed because he provided, really, to me, finances for some of their better players that kept them settled and in place and concentrating on basketball.
It was just time to really tell a great untold Detroit story because it kind of covers Detroit at its zenith.
Very interesting story.
We decided that we were going to make a movie.
All right, Rich Rossi with you with Motown Mafia. I'm with Courtney.
Louis Stevens.
Louis Stevens, Courtney Brown.
Courtney Brown Jr.
And Alan Al Prophet Bradley.
And this is an entrepreneurial, inspirational story too, because again, you know, I'm a real estate retail guy. You know, that's what my skill set is. But I'm a businessman, so I was like, you know, we're gonna do it. You know, sometimes when you got a dream, you won't have all the answers on how you're gonna do what you're gonna do.
What made this one unique was not so much the crime, but the intertwining with Detroit's history and the Motown era and kind of the economic decline of Detroit. And it's really the story of a family. And from some perspectives, it has a happy ending, like you said. For others, it didn't have a happy ending.
Right.